My lords, today I am going to detail everything that we know about the various ground forces that operate in our galaxy. If you can believe it, there are 13 different types of assault forces recruitable by the Commonwealth of Man. I shall detail them all, including how to acquire them, and I shall give a small overview of some notable exceptions at the end of the report. For added value, I shall rank these in terms of quality. It's a simple ranking system: meat for the grinder, solid but expensive, and resistance is futile. I'll start with the meat for the grinder and work my way towards the elite units. And we'll begin with the slave army. Pressed into service through force or coercion, these soldiers fight not out of loyalty, but necessity. Poorly trained and expendable, they are driven into battle by the fear of their overseers. Their lives considered a resource as disposable as the chains that bind them. Slave armies, as one would expect, are the cheapest, poorest armies that empires can field. They are scraped together using the bottom feeders and dregs of society, pressed into service, and given the worst equipment. They are then ordered, on pain of death, to charge forward into enemy formations. Slave armies self-define as meat for the grinder, and are without doubt the poorest possible choice for offensive forces in our galaxy. Their one and only redeeming feature is that they are incredibly cheap to train and to upkeep. Add this to the fact that sheer numbers will still eventually overwhelm even the best defended positions, and they do remain a viable option, if somewhat a brute force option. The final thing to note is that their use often results in messier planetary engagements. Collateral damage will be significantly higher than using regular ground forces, and research suggests this is partially due to their poor fire control discipline, but also as so many more of them perish to the enemy. It creates quite the mess. Next, we have the Assault Army, the bog standard in assault forces. Trained for rapid deployment and direct engagements, these soldiers form the backbone of any planetary invasion. Disciplined and well equipped, they rely on rigorous drilling and coordinated tactics rather than individual brilliance, ensuring they execute orders with unwavering efficiency. Our Commonwealth Assault Army is certainly the backbone of most of our military engagements. They are well-trained men and women, but they will win through sheer numbers rather than any remarkable individual brilliance. They are cheap and relatively quick to train. They also offer somewhat solid performance across the battlefield. Our regular assault army is the yardstick upon which all other forces are measured. They remain as meat for the grinder, but they at least have a certain prestige about them. A little known fact is that many surviving ex-soldiers go on to become very successful political figures. The Clone Army. Specialized clones that reach adulthood in a matter of months. With a natural lifespan of less than a decade, their lack of personal initiative is deemed an acceptable trade-off for their total obedience to officers. Clones are a rather fantastic biological research development. Of all of our military forces, they are the quickest to grow and train, and would you believe it, we can flash grow, fully equip, and train an army of clones in 30% of the time it takes to train a regular army unit. Remarkable indeed. We as an empire will suffer less from war exhaustion if the clones die rather than regular forces, but clones do up creating a little bit more collateral damage than usual. Clones, while a better choice for a protracted campaign, due to their cost efficiency, still remain, in my view, as meat for the grinder, as they are no more individually effective than slaves or regular forces, simply cheaper to train and upkeep. Now we move on to the Robotic Assault Army. Cold and heartless killing machines designed only for war. This robotic army pursues their objectives relentlessly. They are impervious to the shattering effects of poor morale that so often plagues organic combat units. Robotic armies are rather marvelous when compared to the organic variants. They do not suffer from loss of morale and are significantly more durable, twice as much in fact. They do, however, cost 50% more and 50% more to upkeep than our regular assault force. Their inability to be affected by morale is important, as when units lose morale, they end up performing significantly more poorly in ground engagements. This will happen during ground assaults and can outright decide the flow of a battle. Given what's to come, I will still put the Robotic Assault Army in the meat for the grinder, but they do stand above their organic counterparts. The final entry in this category is going to be the Undead Army. Reanimated through necromancy, these soulless creatures know no fear, feel no pain, and march eternally towards their next battle. Devoid of morale or self-preservation, they overwhelm enemies through sheer relentlessness, fighting long past the limits of the living. My lords, I'm not entirely sure how undead armies work, but we have seen necrophages use them. They are somehow capable of reanimating the dead to fight again. It is extremely concerning. Undead forces, although I shall categorize them in meat for the grinder, are far more capable than regular assault forces and on a par with the robotic assault force. They also do not suffer from morale issues, as obviously they're dead and thus have no morale to concern themselves with. They offer a somewhat average offensive capability, but they are slightly cheaper to train and upkeep. An interesting, if somewhat niche offensive force. I would note, however, that even our best trained troopers will not overly enjoy fighting these creatures. They tend to have a not unnoteworthy impact on our own soldiers' morale. This covers all of the units that I'll put in the lowest tier. Now I'll move on to some of the more capable and expensive of our ground forces. Our elite units come with various niches that they can fulfill very well. And we'll begin with Psionic Armies. These are soldiers who have been gifted with psionic abilities. Their focus on destructive psionic powers has led to drastically different tactics and strategies across the battlefield. Their first objective is always to remove the enemy's willingness to fight. Psionic assault forces are the first of the elite that I'll address. They are significantly more expensive than meat grinder armies. For example, a psionic unit is 5 times more expensive than a slave army, but they do offer twice the offensive capability and over 3 times the survivability. The psionic armies fulfill a key niche, and that is that they produce very little, the least of all assault forces in fact, of collateral damage. If the Commonwealth wishes to keep a planet as intact as humanly possible during a combat engagement, the psionic armies are the best for this. They have an ability to sap the morale of enemy ground troopers, causing them to surrender or disengage. It is most effective. The Xenomorphs. On the other end of the spectrum to psionic armies, we have the Xenomorphs. Ravenous hordes of bioengineered horrors made up of little more than teeth, claws, and the instinctive urge to kill. Scientists will monitor and supervise the raging swarms as best they can, from hardened bunkers, well behind front lines. Xenomorph armies excel at collateral damage. They are by far our most brutal and effective assault force at sheer destruction. Xenomorphs should only be used on planets that we wish to completely annihilate piecemeal. Clearing up the mess afterwards is just not worth it. They are fantastically immune to all morale and thus suffer no fear in the face of death, and yet, somewhat obviously, inflict mighty terror upon the unfortunate souls that we deem worthy of their attention. If we want the enemy to suffer, my lords, we should send in the Xenomorphs. Next up, we have the peak of genetic advancement, the Gene Warrior Army. Genetically enhanced super soldiers, recruits are typically chosen from the elite of conventional military forces. These then undergo extensive gene therapy and are made larger, stronger, and faster than their former peers. Our Gene Warriors are the quintessential in elite assault ground forces. They will output the same offensive damage as the Psionics and the Xenomorphs, but they are much more durable. Gene Warriors are, obviously, much less likely to damage the planet than the Xenomorphs. They are, however, quite expensive in my opinion when compared to some of the other ground forces that are available. Not only are they expensive to train, but they are also expensive to upkeep, almost to the point where I would suggest they are just not worth it. Despite this, they remain individually elite. They do, however, have a slight redeeming quality. Due to the nature of gene editing, we are able to spin off specific species variants to make them additionally stronger and more durable. This is something that we are unable to do with other armies, and therefore, although time-consuming, can be used to our advantage. We begin to move into the more niche armies now, and the next to discuss is the Titanic Beast. We found Titanic life on a tropical world near the outer borders of the Empire. Although I have not discussed it yet, think Cybrex Warform, but organic. Think dragon with a cat's head. It would truly make fancy writers of ancient Earth lose their minds, and in my honest opinion, we really shouldn't waste these creatures in war when we have abundant slaves anyway. Anyway, one of our more flamboyant generals requested their deployment, and thus they were shipped across the galaxy to fight for the Commonwealth. The beasts are unsurprisingly extremely capable in battle. They are more durable than the genetic super soldiers and capable of much greater offensive output. They inflict terror and fear into the enemies at a similar rate to Xenomorphs and cause nearly the same levels of collateral destruction. They are, however, expensive to grow and upkeep, and also limited in number, given that we are currently only able to field 3 at any one time. If we lose one in a battle, it's quite devastating to their overall population levels. They are in no doubt solid assault forces, but are not, in my eyes, worthy of the top rank. Next, we have the elite troopers of the Galactic Imperium, the Imperial Legion. The elite soldiers of the Galactic Imperium, recruited from all member nations, drilled and conditioned into ruthless killing machines. They are fanatically loyal to the Imperium. Only individuals with exceptional skills are allowed to become Imperial Legionnaires, which means that we can only field a limited number at any time. The Imperial Legionnaires are a lot like Gene Warriors, only a little stronger. They are a smidge more durable and can output a tiny bit more damage. They are, however, somewhat lackluster, in my opinion, more so when you include the cost and the fact that only 12 legions can be maintained at any one time. I feel the Imperial Legion is more of a reflection of power, a symbol if you will, rather than a long-term viable ground assault force. The Azizian Army is next, and I'll keep this one quite short due to the unique and limited nature of the Ice Alien, i.e. the Azizian. The Azizian is a colossal slug that we found buried deep into an ice floe on a frozen world. Similar to the Titanic lifeform, its numbers due to breeding requirements are somewhat limited, and again, like the Titanic lifeform, the Ice Alien is quite powerful as an assault force. It's twice as durable as a genetic warrior and outputs about 30% more damage. They are a niche force and rarely used for this reason. Finally, in this middle tier of elite ground forces, I've saved the best for last, the Flamestorm Troopers. The Flamestorm Assault Force can be acquired from an astral rift, the one where we find the Baul and the Graneur at war with one another. Empires who choose to side with the Graneur will be able to recruit Flamestorm Assault Forces, who, as you are about to find out, are very capable warriors. Flamestorm Troopers are as durable as Imperial Legionnaires and have the damage output of genetic super soldiers. Where they excel, however, is inflicting terror and fear into the hearts of their opponents, at a rate higher than even the Xenomorphs, which is saying something. Flamestorm Troopers will inflict massive collateral damage, but cost us very little in war exhaustion should we lose them in battle. They are truly fantastic. I note, however, that only the most evil of empires will be able to recruit them. What madness would overcome you to side with the Graneur? Now, my lords, we move on to the cream of the crop, the unquestionably most powerful assault forces that we are capable of deploying onto the battlefield. There are two, and the second one is definitely better. The first, as many of you will have guessed, is the Cybrex Warform. Colossal engines of destruction, Cybrex Warforms stride across the battlefield like unstoppable titans. Their towering frame armies bristling with advanced weaponry and near impenetrable armor. Designed to annihilate entire armies single-handedly, Cybrex Warforms are the ultimate expression of machine supremacy. War incarnate, bound neither by fear nor fatigue, they will tower over the battlefield and they wield enough firepower to devastate cities. Cybrex Warforms are unique in that they cost alloys to build rather than minerals or energy. They also take by far the longest to build. For example, you could recruit 17 clone armies, equip them and train them in the time it takes to forge a single Cybrex Warform. However, they are utterly ruthless in their combat abilities. Cybrex Warforms output the most damage of any assault force in the galaxy, 10 times as much as a regular army unit, and they are 7 times as durable. Warforms inflict terror and fear at a rate of twice that of a Xenomorph, and being mechanical by nature, they are entirely immune to morale themselves. They are truly remarkable machines, and the Cybrex sure knew how to build them. Of course, in order to build these marvelous creations of war, you'll need to find Cybrex Alpha, and a Cybrex Relic, the Warforge no less. Empires who are lucky enough to find one will gain access to these incredibly powerful war machines. the most powerful and strongest assault force in the galaxy is the Warplings. We acquired the Warplings from an astral rift where we discovered a bioweapons lab. It appeared that these small creatures had been grown for war, and the designer did a wonderful job. Warplings are man-sized creatures with claws the size of longswords and teeth that can cut as deep as any mining laser. They are formidable individually, but we can produce them in swarms. Their real power, though, is that they can phase, or teleport if you will, via a not understood astral mechanism. This means that the Warplings can bypass artillery or the most defensive bastions set up to hold them. They even utilize this ability in combat, using it to dodge bullets, axe blades, and the like. Warplings represent a tremendous power in our galaxy. Warplings are the equal of Cybrex Warforms in terms of offensive capability. However, they inflict barely any collateral damage, making them far more effective for keeping the planet that you're invading intact. Warplings are also far quicker to recruit. You can recruit 5 in the time it takes to forge a single Cybrex Warform. They are slightly less durable, having around 30% of the survivability of Warforms, but when you factor in cost, build speed and upkeep, they certainly come out on top. Like the Warforms, Warplings are also immune to all morale, but they will affect the Empire far less if we lose them, partly due to their alien nature, but also because they're relatively cheap and quick to replace. That, my lords, covers all of the organic assault forces that we can recruit in the galaxy. I'll briefly touch on some of the Machine Empire specific armies now. They have equivalents that appear to match our own. There are 3 Machine Armies. The first is the Hunter-Killer Army. Designed for precision extermination, these relentless war machines stalk the battlefield with calculated efficiency. Lacking fear, hesitation, or the need for rest, they execute their directives with cold mechanical perfection, reducing enemy forces to nothing but statistical inevitabilities. Hunter-Killer armors are essentially a match to our own basic mechanical assault forces. They are a passable unit and the mainstay of a Machine Empire. Battle frame armies are the next step up in a Machine Empire's ground arsenal. These are towering war machines built for frontline devastation. These heavily armoured battle frame titans will outmatch organic soldiers in strength, endurance and firepower. They are designed to wade through enemy lines like walking fortresses, and they will bring the full weight of machine warfare to any battlefield, crushing resistance with ruthless efficiency. The battle frame army is slightly weaker than a genetic warrior, but it is also slightly cheaper to produce, and thus sits somewhere in between. And the strongest unit a Machine Empire can produce is the Mega Warform. Colossal engines of destruction, Mega Warforms stride across the battlefield like unstoppable titans. Their towering frames bristling with advanced weaponry and near impenetrable armor. Designed to annihilate entire armies single-handedly, they are the ultimate expression of machine supremacy. War incarnate, bound neither by fear nor fatigue. Mega Warforms are the machine's attempt to copy the Cybrex Warform. They are, however, a poor attempt. Although powerful, they do not match the Cybrex variant in ability. They are, however, cheaper to build, but take just as long. Clearly the machines of our day cannot match the once mighty Cybrex. And finally, my lords, we have some special examples of non-recruitable ground forces that we have witnessed defending various strongholds across the galaxy. And we begin with the Xenomorphs Army. These can be found defending fruitful partnership empires, and they're somewhat equivalent to genetic super soldiers. Then, there are 2 types of mercenary army. Driven by profit rather than loyalty, these seasoned soldiers are hired guns who fight for the highest bidder. Well equipped and highly skilled, they approach each battle with a calculated pragmatism, willing to adapt their tactics to suit any conflict as long as the payment is right. Mercenaries are essentially a slightly stronger version of regular assault troopers. There is also a mechanized mercenary army, and these are the Merc robot equivalents. They are slightly better than the organic counterparts. Both of these units can be purchased from mercenary enclaves. There is also the Psionic Avatar. This is an oddity indeed. We have never seen it, but suspect if it's the same as the Psionic Avatars that we've seen roaming the galaxy, it may be quite dangerous indeed. It can be acquired via psionic empires pacting and dealing with shroud entities. The penultimate ground force is the Skeletal Giant. This is quite literally a gigantic skeleton that's ready to wreak havoc across the universe, and it's not gentle. This is an odd one indeed. We have seen this giant creature reanimated by a Necromancer Empire, though how they did it is unknown to us. And finally, we have Grey. In Grey's ground force combat mode, it is remarkably capable. Although singular, Grey has the offensive output of a Cybrex Warform, but the durability of more than 2 of them. Its party piece, and I should note, I feel like the intel might be off on this one, is that Grey has the ability to inflict fear and terror on a planet at a level of 6 times a Cybrex Warform, which seems almost unbelievable, but quite remarkable if true. That concludes this dive into the ground forces of the galaxy. If you enjoyed it and want to hear a similar report on the recent influx of cosmic storms, then please click the video on screen now.